There are people who didn't just change history, they shaped the very soul of humanity. On this channel, we tell the stories of these great minds, so our children and their children will never forget where we came from and the giants who built the world we live in today. Because only by honoring the past can we truly understand our present and create a future worth living.
I was born on an April morning in 1564, when white apple blossoms fell all over the quiet town of Stratford-upon-Avon. When my first cries echoed inside that humble house on Henley Street, no one imagined that this fragile, red-faced baby would one day make the whole world listen. My father, John Shakespeare, a straightforward man with calloused hands from tanning leather day and night. Not just a craftsman, but a clever businessman, a respected town official, a dreamer who wished for me to continue his trade, expand the family shop, and live a safe, respectable life. Like every father everywhere, he only wanted the best for his son. My mother, Mary Arden, oh, that remarkable woman. She had brown hair shining like chestnuts, eyes as green as spring grass. Her voice, sweet as a bird's morning song. She came from an old noble family, but her heart belonged to nature and to fairy tales. Every afternoon, golden light streamed through the small window. She held me close and told me stories of fairies deep in the woods, brave princes, and love that could never die. Those stories, they lit the first spark inside my little heart, a flame that would one day explode into immortal plays. Books were rare treasures then. I only had a few my mother found, but every time a traveling theater troupe came to town, oh, my heart would race. I'd run from my father, sprint to the town square, push through the crowd, peeking through gaps in the wooden stage. The glow of torches on actors' faces, the loud applause, the cries of mothers when a character died, the laughter of children. It was pure magic. Standing there, eyes wide open, my soul trembled, as if someone inside was waking me up. That moment, I knew. Even if my father dreamed of a clever merchant, my heart had chosen another path, the path of words, of raw, human emotions, of truth. At age 7, I entered King Edward VI Grammar School. They said I was sharp, quick to learn, especially good at Latin. The school focused on classical literature, grammar, rhetoric, the perfect foundation for any mind. But instead of focusing on books, I watched people, the teacher's frown when angry, the joy in my friends' eyes, the way sunlight cast shadows on faces. I collected those moments. Like jewels I would one day turn into art. Every face, every glance, every smile, a living page revealing the secrets of the human soul. At night, I lay on my creaky wooden bed, listening to wind through the trees, staring at the moon through my small window. I asked myself, could a poor, small-town boy ever reach bright, wild London? Could he stand before thousands, make them laugh, make them weep, make them think? Could he touch the hearts of the entire world? I didn't know. The future was as foggy as dawn mist. But one thing, I knew for certain. I would rather burn in that crazy dream, face poverty, failure, ridicule, than die slowly in a safe, narrow life. Because I believed, inside every human heart, there is a stage, and my mission was to set it alight. But a dream, no matter how bright, cannot survive on moonlight alone. After years of watching, dreaming, collecting every smile and shadow like a man obsessed with rare gems, life knocked at my door. Responsibility, family, love, things no verse could truly escape. I had to choose between the world inside my mind, where I was a king, a prince, a hero, and the world beyond the window, where I was only the son of a glove maker. And so, my story turned toward love, sacrifice, and a painful yet beautiful leap toward a distant city that would change me forever. At 18, on an autumn afternoon filled with golden sunlight, I married Anne Hathaway. She was 26, 8 years older than me, an age difference that made many shake their heads. In those days, a marriage to an older woman, especially one already pregnant, was not rare, but it still stirred whispers in a small town. They murmured it was a rushed wedding because she carried our first child. Historical records from the Diocese of Worcester show that our special marriage license was granted on November 27, 1582, and our first daughter, Susanna, was born just 6 months later in May 1583. This strengthens the idea of a hurried marriage, but to me, Anne was more than a wife. She was my first audience, the only soul patient enough to listen to my unfinished lines whispered through sleepless nights. Her warm brown eyes always listened, even if she did not fully understand the wild dreams burning inside my heart. Though there are few direct records of our relationship, the fact that Anne kept our family in Stratford when I left for London shows her quiet trust and support. When my first daughter, little Susanna, cried into the May night, and then, 2 years later, our twins Hamlet and Judith arrived, I felt the weight of responsibility tighten around me like ropes. Having 3 children in just a few years placed a huge financial burden on a young father like me, especially when my father, John Shakespeare, began facing business troubles in the late 1580s. The shop needed managing, debts piled up, and endless demands of a small-town life pulled at me. Each morning, I felt trapped in the same routine, selling gloves, calculating profit and loss, worrying about every meal for my family. But deep inside, there was a voice that never stopped screaming. A voice louder than any market noise, more haunting than any stormy night. It whispered to me every time I set down my pen, every time I saw my own tired eyes in the small mirror. It said, "You do not belong here. You were born to go beyond these narrow streets, beyond these safe, gentle nights, beyond even this love." London called to me like a distant flame. I heard about it from traveling merchants, a city full of danger, where the Black Plague devoured thousands, ruthless rivals stalked the shadows, and dark alleys took lives over a single coin. But at the same time, it was a city of stages, where words echoed in candlelit halls, where theaters like the Theater, the Curtain, and later the Globe burst with life, where thousands of souls longed to hear stories, to weep, to laugh, to live inside words. London then was England's cultural and entertainment heart, a magnet pulling artists from every corner. Leaving was the cruelest decision I ever made. I left Stratford quietly one foggy morning. No loud farewells, no heroic goodbye. I simply turned and walked away, my mind filled with unfinished lines, and my heart heavy with both guilt and hope. I carried Anne's worried eyes as she stood in the doorway, holding our twins. The sweet scent of my children's hair as I kissed their foreheads one last time. The memory of my mother's gentle hands stroking my hair, and my father's disappointed sigh, realizing his son had chosen a madman's path. I carried all of them, like silent ghosts trailing every step toward London. With each step, I felt a piece of my heart tear away and stay behind. When I first saw the city's flickering lights through the twilight fog, my breath caught in my throat. London did not welcome a country boy like me. It was not as gentle as the peaceful fields of Stratford, but it was alive, wild, fierce, a giant heart pounding, waiting to be torn open by words, by stories no one had yet told. I had no money, no patron, only a burning pen in my chest, and a stubborn, perhaps foolish, belief that words could move mountains, and perhaps heal the very wounds I had carved into myself. This was the true beginning of a great stage, where a young man from Stratford, with a heart full of guilt and hope, would become a name whispered across centuries. Because sometimes, the scariest leap is the one that takes you away from everything you love, toward where you truly belong. And sometimes, to find yourself, you must have the courage to hurt those you love most. But only when you dare to step onto the giant stage called destiny do you realize the lights were always waiting for you, and this was only the opening act. Leaving Stratford was not an ending, it was an entrance, the last gaze of a shy young man upon his hometown fields, before stepping onto the grandest stage of his life, London, a dazzling capital filled with danger, the roaring heart of a rising empire. Behind me, echoes of love, guilt, and silent goodbyes. Ahead, a city howling, hungry for words, ready to crown, or crush, any dreamer bold enough to enter. And so, my true performance began. London did not open its arms to me. It tested me, dissected every corner of my soul like a ruthless surgeon. At first, I lived in cheap inns, where the smell of mold and stale beer seeped into every thread of my clothes. I shared cold rooms with unknown actors, dreamers with tired eyes from endless nights, and drifters with trembling hands from too much ale. I wandered through dark alleys at dawn, listening to drunkards' fights, and broken verses floating in the night air like wandering ghosts. From the dark corners of crowded taverns, I watched poets recite unfinished sonnets with shaky voices, actors bragging about roles they never won, their eyes shining to hide quiet despair, and the city's heartbeat echoing in each raised glass, each harsh laugh turning into a cough of pain. When I finally found a stage, at first, I was not yet a famous playwright. Perhaps I started as a horse attendant outside the theater, or a minor actor, or a script copyist. I was not yet a name, I was just a shadow in the wings, learning each line like scripture, every step like dance, each audience heartbeat like music. Those early years, from the late 1580s to around 1592, were the so-called lost years. But they became the foundation of my entire future. I studied faces in the dim candlelight, the silent tears of a nobleman watching King Lear's betrayal, the drunken cheers of a fishmonger laughing at Falstaff's tricks, the sigh of a young woman seeing herself in Juliet or Ophelia. Then the words came, words that howled, tearing me open like wolves in the night, as if gods had possessed me. Early plays like Titus Andronicus or Henry VI Parts 2 and 3 began to echo from the early 1590s, revealing my growing talent. Romeo, Hamlet, Macbeth, not just names, but mirrors reflecting every human heart, showing love so bright it blinds, pain so deep it swallows the soul, ambition so fierce it burns the very conscience. As the plays grew, so did the crowds, from nobles in velvet seats above to thieves standing in the muddy pit below. They all came to see themselves, fear, love, failure, hope, told back to them under flickering torchlight. The stage became my church, my confession, my battlefield, a place where I was no longer just William, but all the people I had ever created. But success never came without shadows. Whispers from jealous rivals, just a country upstart. Among them was writer Robert Greene, who publicly attacked me in 1592, calling me an upstart crow, a crow daring to mimic and claim superiority over the masters before him. Plots from enemies trying to steal roles and fame. And then, the plague threatened to shut every theater by dawn. In 1593, the plague hit like a storm of the apocalypse. When deaths exceeded 30 a week, all theaters closed. London's theaters often closed during plagues, especially between 1592 and 1594, a crushing challenge for actors and writers alike. 14 months, without applause, without stage lights. I lost friends to plague, actors to betrayal, even my own words to fires that devoured entire theaters. Yet every night, I returned to the stage, because that was where I truly existed. In each silent gasp of the audience, each slight quiver of my voice when Romeo called Juliet's name, each breath held when Hamlet raised his sword. That was where William, the boy from Stratford with small dreams, disappeared, and Shakespeare, the echo, the legend, the immortal mask the world would remember, was born. Because sometimes, to become a legend, you must die a little inside, and to become immortal, you must live in every word, every character, every heart you touch. Fame is a double-edged sword. It lifts you above the crowd, but also isolates you, like a lonely star burning in the night sky. As my words echoed throughout London, my heart longed for something simpler. Between 1606 and 1613, my plays grew darker, more complex. This was the era of my greatest tragedies, my great tragic period. King Lear, with the ultimate pain of betrayal and madness. Macbeth, the haunting obsession of ambition and guilt. Coriolanus, the complexities of power and pride. They carried the weight of betrayal, madness, and the fragile thread of power. It felt as if I was no longer just writing for the stage, but confessing the shadows within my own soul, reflecting my contemplation of human nature and society at the peak of my career. By then, I was no longer just a playwright. I became a successful businessman, an important co-owner of Lord Chamberlain's Men, later the King's Men, owning shares in the Globe Theatre and later Blackfriars. It brought me considerable wealth, enough to buy land and property in Stratford, including the Grand House New Place. My name was everywhere, yet my heart felt farther from home than ever. In 1613, disaster struck. During a performance of Henry VIII, a stage cannon misfired and set the Globe Theatre ablaze. Within hours, the wooden heart that had cradled so many of my dreams collapsed into ashes. That was a sign that my stage was no longer here. Although the Globe was rebuilt, this fire marked a turning point, prompting my gradual withdrawal from London. I returned to Stratford, the old fields, the Avon River whispering at dawn, the small, aging house welcoming a son who had become a legend. There, I tried to live quietly, tending my land, watching my daughters grow, especially Susanna, who married the well-known physician John Hall. And I wrote less and less. The quill felt heavier, as if each word demanded a piece of my spirit. Though I no longer created new plays as before, I continued revising older works and managing my estate. On April 23, 1616, I took my final bow. Some say I died after a night of heavy drinking with old friends, including Ben Jonson, according to Reverend John Ward's notes. Others whispered it was a fever, or perhaps the quiet loneliness after the final curtain fell. The true cause of my death remains a mystery, but most agree I left suddenly in Stratford. But death was not the end. My words still breathe on every stage, still echo in every lover's sigh, still linger in every question under the moonlight. I became more than a man. I became a mirror, reflecting every joy, every sorrow, and every silent hope of the human heart. In 1623, 7 years after my passing, my fellow actors gathered and published the first folio, a collection of 36 plays, a monumental work preserving my legacy for eternity. Without it, many of my works might have been lost forever. From the boy in Stratford to the man who gave voices to kings, fools, and ghosts, I learned that we do not live forever in flesh, but in the hearts we touch. Because in the end, we are all stories. And as long as someone, somewhere, whispers your words, you never truly die. If you hear these words now, know they are not merely echoes from the past, but living heartbeats, reaching across centuries to find you. Echoes from my characters I wrote of kings and beggars, of lovers and traitors, of fools and ghosts, because all of them live within each of us. I believe theater is not just entertainment. It is a mirror that reflects the human soul, helping us see deeper into our true selves. We are kings in our pride, beggars in our fears, lovers in our hopes, and ghosts in our regrets. It is this complexity of human nature that makes my characters live on, because they are a part of you. Life is your stage. Your life is your greatest stage. Every choice, every tear, every whispered dream is your script. Be the author of your story. Do not let anyone else write it for you. So dare to feel, dare to stumble, dare to rise again. Love like Romeo, fiercely and passionately. Question, like Hamlet, to seek the deepest truths. Fight, like Macbeth, even against cruel fate. And forgive, like Cordelia, with the purest compassion. The legacy of a lifetime. In the end, we do not take our riches, our crowns, or the sound of applause. We carry only the love we gave and the stories we leave behind. That is why I devoted my life to words, because they are eternal. So step into your own light, speak your truth, embrace your pain, laugh, weep, and live, as if your soul is both audience and actor. Because one day, long after your final curtain falls, someone, somewhere, will whisper your name. And in that breath, you will live again. Just like my grave at Holy Trinity Church in Stratford, with the words, "Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." I hope your story too will be preserved and retold forever.
If this story touched your heart, leave a like, share it to keep the echoes alive, and follow the channel so we can preserve the immortal legacies of humanity together. Because as long as one person keeps telling the story, it never truly dies. Hit follow to hear the voices of the great minds and keep their stories alive forever.